We're seeing the impact of the war in the Middle East being felt in many ways. Canadian farmers are one group that you might be surprised to hear are already dealing with the repercussions. The average cost of widely used fertilizer has increased rapidly. Experts say about 1/3 of global fertilizer exports passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Even though Canada produces its own fertilizer supplies, buyers here are still subject to global commodity prices. And those prices are also driving gasoline prices, critical minerals that food producers across Canada use almost every day. To talk more about this, we've reached Jeff Harrison, the chair of Grain Farmers of Ontario, also a farmer himself. He grows grain, raises cattle in Quinte West, Ontario. Jeff, thanks very much for joining us so early this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I just want to start by talking about these fertilizer prices. We've heard that they've been climbing because of the war in the Middle East. Can you put that in real terms for us about what that means for farmers like you heading into this growing season?
Well, it's very frustrating. Not only the price, but just the supply itself is in question. And yes, Canada is a net exporter of nitrogen fertilizer, but the production is concentrated in the West. In Eastern Canada, we have been reliant upon fertilizer imports. So we are subject to global impacts and these geopolitical tensions we see around the world, whether it's sources from areas like Trinidad and subject to the Venezuelan conflict, or yes, fertilizer that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz is posing real challenges as far as supply and price. And of course, those fertilizer imports in Eastern Canada, we've been subject to a fertilizer tariff since 2022 that is also contributing to these high prices. So it is extremely frustrating for farmers, especially in Eastern Canada, because these prices have been on a upward trajectory for almost 4 years now.
So what does that mean for your bottom line then when you're looking at the actual amount that the costs have increased since this conflict began?
Well, that's the trouble. It's the unknown. That's why it is so frustrating. The challenge is farmers have, secured a portion of their fertilizer, and that's, across the spectrum. Some farmers would have high supplies secured and some would have none. But it's the unknown when you're not sure if you can even get it and what our input suppliers will be able to get it at, the unknown price. It's really hard to determine how this year is going to fare out financially for farmers. So there's stress and worry and fear of that unknown.
How do you reconcile that on the land as you're heading into this growing season? What are some of the sort of choices that you're faced with now?
Well, you have to plan for a crop that you may have to be able to switch, which is, difficult because we all make plans as far as our inputs and how we're going to market that crop. So it poses a lot of challenges. But remember, farmers operate on a lot of faith. We hope and pray that it's going to work out and things will be good. But yes, it is posing some real stresses for, especially, I said, Eastern Canadian farmers are really being impacted by these geopolitical issues.
A lot of this obviously depends on the weather and the season that is ahead, and we do our best to predict those things, but we never really can tell. But, if you're looking at your own forecasts for this year, if you have to make those kinds of choices, what is the reality that you're looking at the end of this season if this persists?
Well, for many of us in Eastern Canada, right through to the Maritimes, we were really impacted by a severe drought last year. And so many of us are coming off a poor production year. So that tightens finances. That's part of the problem this year is farmers didn't have the money that they would need to have to secure some of that fertilizer last fall. That in combination with a fertilizer tariff that is still at the federal level that needs to go, and all these issues around the world, that's what's leading to this. And so it is a big concern for farmers because as we all know in our personal lives, prices of everything have been going up and farmers are no exception. So it takes a lot of finances to put a crop in the ground nowadays.
Not immune for sure to the cost of living crisis that all Canadians are facing right now. You know, this is a family business, I understand, for you when you're looking at, you know, the future for farmers and the instability around the world and the cost of living. What goes through your mind?
Well, there's worry. There's lots of worry on Ontario farms. You know, farmers, as I mentioned, operate on a lot of faith. We try to look to the future with positivity, always looking on the bright side. But yeah, there's worry. There's worry on our farms about not only these costs, worry about the next generation being able to come home to farm and just being able to be sustainable. Remember, farmers do an incredibly good things for the environment in our province and in our country, but they need to be economically sustainable so that we can continue to be environmentally sustainable and do the good things that we do. And remember, Canada, not just Ontario and Eastern Canada, but Canada as a whole, sends food around the world. It's a very noble profession, farming. And a lot of countries look upon us as a steady, consistent supplier of grain and food. And we do a good thing when we help nations that don't have the good farmers we have. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety on farms in Canada as a result of these conflicts, whether it's not only the Iranian conflict, but tariffs over the last year has been a lot of stress.
Jeff, I know you're not alone in your story, but thanks very much for sharing the view from your farm with us this morning, and keep in touch as this ongoing turmoil continues.
We will, and thanks for having us.